postures and facial expressions. We're going to talk about facial expressions next. Looking at this picture, this picture says 1,000 words. It really does. So what do we have here? We've got John McCain, who ran against Barack Obama in 2008 for President of the United States. And at one point, I mentioned this in the video anyway, at one point they decided that the Republicans decided they were going to play the race card and see if they couldn't get people not to vote for Barack Obama because he's African, or he has African ancestry. And John McCain said, no, I'm not going to play the race card. I'm not going to allow you to do it. He said he's a member of the Senate and he's a highly respected member of the Senate. There's no reason for us to attack him on racial grounds. So he refused to run that part of the campaign. And of course, the person that was pushing that was what's her name? What was her name? The lady who's running for vice president. Why can't I think of her name? Because it's not important. Former governor of Alaska. Anyway, she was the one that was pushing this thing, and then she became a conservative talk show host. John McCain went back into the Senate and has been a distinguished member of the Senate ever since. Anyway, so Barack Obama became president, was elected twice, and here we see these two men have a great deal of respect for each other. There were no attacks. Obama did not attack John McCain for anything. He didn't really attack him. He attacked his positions, but he didn't attack the man. And of course, that's what McCain did as well. It was probably the cleanest campaign we've had in a long time. Certainly a lot cleaner than last time, where Donald Trump was calling Hillary Clinton a criminal and lock her up. I mean, they were screaming, lock her up. Anyway, there was nothing like that was going on between McCain and Obama. So here we have a picture, and what we have is a circle of interest. We have Barack Obama crossing his left leg over his right leg, and we have John McCain crossing his right leg over his left leg. In other words, they are pointing toward one another, and they are telling the world that the two of them are not only friendly, but they're creating an intimate circle. And here's Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel was something, I don't know what he was, but he was in charge of the White House. He was the White House director. Now he's the mayor of Chicago. But here we have Rahm Emanuel. He's also crossing his left leg over his right leg. He's left-handed, he's left-handed, he's left-handed. They're all left-handed, yet they're crossing different legs. He's trying to be part of this group, but he can't because Obama has crossed his left leg, and what he's showing the world is that he has an intimate relationship with John McCain. That's what the picture shows, as odd as that may seem. Okay. One of the areas that social psychologists have found fascinating is the impact that teachers seem to have on their students. When they pay attention to them, if they consider them smart or ignore them because they consider them poor students. And you may have seen this when you were in school. This may be happening to your own children if you have children. But this is just one of the realities of the world, is the fact that teachers like some students and they don't like others. Normally we take the students we don't like and we put them in the back of the room. No offense, Edison, of course. Anyway. And we don't talk to them. We ignore them. We teach to the front row, which is kind of odd if you think about it. But teachers will do this. Female teachers like female students better than they like male students. Oddly enough, male teachers like female students more than male students as well. So male students are kind of the odd gender out in this case. They're certainly more rejected than female students are. And you can see this. I mean, if you think back on your high school days, maybe other instructors, who do they pay attention to? Who do they talk to? Whose names do they know? These are all really important things. 115 studies have been done showing that teacher expectation can influence a student favorably or unfavorably. And of course, you can allow that, and you can allow this to happen. You can be in a class where the teacher doesn't ever look at you, doesn't ever pay any attention to you, and suddenly, despite the fact that you were fairly neutral about the class before, now all of a sudden you don't like the class anymore. You don't want to study. You decided not to study mathematics because the teacher won't pay any attention to you. This happened to my wife when she was in college. She was taking an economics class. My wife was the first female practically everything that she ever did. She was the first female to try it. She graduated from high school in 1969. And so when she was in high school, she majored in home economics, of course, because, well, that's what you want. That's what you do if you're a female. She couldn't major in math. She actually majored in Latin, as odd as that may seem. Went to the University of Georgia, and she was a business major. Well, there were only 2 female business majors in the entire school, and she had professors. This is in Georgia. And this is in the 1970s. This is in the beginning of the 1970s. So all that sexism and racism was still taking place. My wife is white, but there was racism taking place. There were no African Americans in the class, but she had professors, especially her economics professor. He told her that women don't have the brains to pass economics. They just don't understand it. And he told her that she would not pass the class. And she and another girl were in the class, and they swore when they were told that they couldn't do it, that they were going to pass. And they did. They passed. They both got C's, but they at least passed. If he asked a question, she was the one that answered it, because she wanted to show him that he was completely incorrect. And at the end of the semester, he actually apologized to them to some extent. It was one of those, well, I guess you made it, situations. Anyway, so teachers can really make a huge impact on people. Research shows that when a teacher expects a student has high potential, they look, smile, and nod more at them. Okay, will try to do that in the future. They also set higher goals, call on them more, and give them more time to answer a question. They treat students with low expectations in the opposite manner. They have low goals for them. They're less likely to call on them. They have more stern expressions when they look at them, and they give them less time to answer a question. So we can control things with our expectations, and especially teachers, which is kind of sad if you think about it. You've got somebody that wants to learn. They're busting their tails trying to learn something, and then they get short-circuited by the teacher and their attitude toward it, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I'll try to be nicer to everybody in the future. It isn't just teachers that have this type of reaction. People in everyday activity can jinx or bless their interactions with others with mere expectations. So it's the way you treat people. It's the way you look at people. It's whether you smile or don't smile. Conflict from one party tends to engender conflict in the other individual. So if you're pissed off about something, it doesn't really matter what you're pissed off about, but you demonstrate this to the other individual, then potentially you're going to create conflict in that individual. I'm really sensitive about these things. I try to be as positive as I possibly can. When I interact with individuals, I try not to have a bad facial expression. Even when I buy food at the fast food restaurant and I'm driving through, I always take my sunglasses off. I want them to see my eyes for some reason. I haven't quite figured that out. I try to smile and I try to be polite. And usually you get good service. And even if you don't get good service, what the hell? What difference does it make? But I try to be nice to people. I tend to get good reactions from them. On the other hand, romance that is entered into with positive expectations are more likely to engender positive results. So if you marry somebody and you think, well, this guy's, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have, one of those kind of situations. I don't know if this thing's going to last, the probability of it lasting is fairly remote. The more positive you are, the more likely it's going to be you're going to have positive results. How about that? I know. My wife and I agreed not to exchange Valentine's gifts.
Why?
And I'm wondering if this is going to work or not. One Valentine's Day, she gave me an axe. It was a Mexican axe. You say, well, what difference does it make where it's from? It was made out of, the handle was made out of this cheap, junky wood. I don't know, it wasn't ash anyway. And I busted the head off that axe in about 5 swings. Yeah, I know. It was really kind of odd. So then I tried to find another axe handle to fit it, but it was from Mexico, so it was kind of cheap. So I couldn't find one that actually fit. I had to whittle one down. So I finally got an white ash handle, and I used the thing, and I actually busted the head off of it. I busted the head. I know, seems kind of odd. Why would you buy? That's passionate. Right there, an axe. Your wife bought you an axe. That's wonderful.
Like from Mexico?
From Mexico too, yeah.
Well, maybe it was.
It must have been cheap.
Display.
It must have been cheap.
For display.
What'd you get her for that Valentine's Day gift?
I'm sorry?
What did you get her for the Valentine's Day gift in return?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Is that bad?
I can't buy her chocolates because she's always on a diet, so that's not going to work. I don't know. I usually get her something. One year when I was up north, I bought all this stuff. They were giving away all this stuff, and there were things in boxes, and there were stuffed teddy bears and whatnot. And I just bought one of it each. You know, it's one of those kind of deals. Well, it turned out, guess what was in the boxes?
Chocolate.
I'm sorry?
Chocolate.
No, I wish it had been chocolates. Condoms. There were condoms in the boxes. I'm going, whoa, oh, I didn't know that. What am I saying? I think you've got a venereal disease and a sexually transmitted. That's what condoms. Anyway, that was a little odd. Not surprisingly, when people have social expectations about an individual or situation, they tend to act in a way that confirms their expectations, and this is known as self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you think it's going to be one way, if you think the clerk at the counter is going to be mean and grouchy, and you act like they're going to be mean and grouchy, guess what happens? They're going to be mean and grouchy. It's the way it works. This is known as behavioral confirmation. If you're afraid of all white people because all white people are greedy, then you're going to act like they're going to be greedy, and guess what will happen next? They will probably be greedy. It's just the way it works. Research shows that when men think that a woman is attracted to them, they are more willing to look favorably on them as in employment. And actually, I will admit that I have gotten jobs because the lady was attracted to me, and which is kind of an oddity. I guess she was half blind or something, but I've gotten jobs that way, and it's okay because I guess it's okay. Isn't it okay? At least I had something to do, right? Yeah, it's not my fault she was attracted to me, is it? No, I don't think so. Yeah. And it's happened. Some women like short, fat men, short, old, fat guys. She was older than I was. Anyway, as strange as that may seem. Anyway, categorization. Category, mental groupings of objects, ideas, or events that share common properties. For example, I just came back from Gallup, and I had to decide what kind of food I was going to get. I was hungry. I was really hungry when I drove through Gallup. So I had to decide what kind of food I was going to get. Well, you drive up, what is that, 141 or 411 or whatever that road is, the one that comes up to Saley. Well, geez, there's Wendy's and Sonic and McDonald's and Arby's and Panda Express and Del Taco and Taco Bell. Around the corners, Carl's Jr., Cracker Barrel's down there. Do you want to sit down? Right? What did I miss?
McDonald's.
Burger King, McDonald's.
Caesars.
So you have to decide what you want, right? I mean, you got to decide what you want. What am I hungry for? If you go over the bridge and onto 66, there's Long John Silver's and Pizza Hut. So driving through Gallup, you've got your choice of just about any place you want. Denny's is down the road. So we categorize things, don't we? I'll never stop at Sonic because I don't like their hamburgers, you know, one of those kind of deals. We categorize everything. So where would you stop? I mean, if you were hungry, where would you stop?
Blake's.
Blake's? Blake's is, yeah, it's right in there. It's there. Okay, so you're going to stop at Blake's? Stop at Blake's at, isn't there one in Winter Road?
Yeah, Say Benito.
Okay, so there you go, sure. Blake's, so we're going to stop at Good Hamburgers?
Really good hamburgers.
Really? Man, maybe.
Really good fries too.
Okay, I'll stop there the next time I go to Gallup, which may be on Friday. I may have to go to Albuquerque.
Oh
Oh. So I'll stop at Blake's. Where are you going to go, Francis?
On that side of town or any side of town?
I don't care, any place in Gallup. We're categorizing things now. So we're taking places that we would go and places that we wouldn't go and throwing out, you know, I'll never go to Sonic, I'll never go to Wendy's, they spit on their hamburgers, you know, that kind of thing. Where are you stopping, man? Come on.
The Chinese place.
A Chinese place, Panda Express, okay.
No, not Panda.
Cracker Barrel? Okay, that's good food. It's on the plate. Can't beat that. Oh, come on.
I don't like Gallup, but
Tacos.
You don't like Gallup? I hate Albuquerque.
if I had to eat there, I would probably eat at Panda.
Panda Express,
Yeah.
which is not even close to real Chinese food, but that's not.
Yeah.
Hans Lake.
Where?
Hans Lake.
Where is it?
It's over in Gallup, now on Main Street. We're actually, yeah,
Okay,
downtown.
okay, all right.
Sizzler.
Jerry's.
Sizzler? Sizzler, we're not about Sizzler. Is there a Golden Corral there?
He changed his mind.
Where are you going now?
Jerry's.
Oh, yeah. To where? Jerry's.
Jerry's.
Where's Jerry's? What's
It's next to the Ford dealership, near Ford dealership, down the road.
Okay,
Is it
so are you
Mexican?
changing your, you're
Yeah.
going to, okay, you're going
I
to
forgot
Jerry's
about
too.
that.
All down at Jerry's.
So we categorize everything. If you're hungry for Chinese food, you go to Panda Express or maybe the Golden Pagoda or whatever that place is. There's a steak place right beside there, isn't there? Yeah, okay.
Remember
So
that really good Mexican place? What's it called?
is there a really good Mexican?
Kind of way back there too.
It's like way over there by the train.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
Virgins?
Virginia's?
No, no, the other one. Where they always have tipper royalty.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
I don't remember that place, but they're
We're
really
so
good.
close to Mexico, and the Mexican food around here is really bad.
No, it's not.
Yes, it
You haven't
is.
tried amigos in Kansas.
Okay. So I guess it's all depends on what you're used to. If you think Taco Bell is Mexican food, then yeah, that's not real Mexican. Okay, so we categorize everything. Prototype is a representative member of the category. So if we're talking about fast food restaurant, what pops into your mind? Fast food, you want to drive through, get just for a burger or whatever. Fast food, where do you go?
Sonic.
Sonic?
Blake's.
Blake's?
McDonald's.
McDonald's? I've been going to McDonald's for 50 years.
You tired of it?
I hate it. Oh, man, I disliked it the first time I did.
I have to go to like a place where I can get bulk for a cheaper price, so it'd be either Taco Bell or KFC.
There you go.
BK.
BK? Okay. Burger King, it's the only place you can go in, Chin Lee, right? Burger King, it's the only one there is. Where else are you gonna get a hamburger in?
They
Drive
used
through.
they used to have an A&W down in Chinle, and it was really good.
They used to have a Dairy Queen that I stopped at every time I went to Gallup, and now they closed it.
What? Did they close it?
Yeah, it's closed. It's been closed for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months now.
Oh my
I know, I was so upset. I always got a hot fudge milkshake just to drive all the way to Window Rock. course, I finished it before I got to window rug. Anyway, so those are your prototypes. Categorization reduces information overload. We don't have to worry about it. So we're talking about fast food restaurants. You go to Japan, you're thinking of fast food restaurants. You go to Germany, you think of fast food restaurants. They don't really eat fast food over there, except for McDonald's. And then they have a thing called Wimpy's, which is really, really bad hamburgers. Categorization can lead to mistakes in judgment, of course, because you're stereotyping, you're generalizing. So, but categorization is extremely important. Let's say you're in a situation like, let's say you're in a combat situation, and you're over in Iraq or Afghanistan, and you're looking at people, and you've got to figure out who the good guys are and the bad guys are, and you have to figure it out by looking at them because you have no other criteria to use. You have to categorize people. This guy's wearing clothes that I have shot at before, so potentially he's a dangerous individual. This guy's wearing Western clothes. He's probably okay, because where the hell are you going to hide your gun in wearing clothes like this? You know, that kind of a situation. This guy's wearing really loose clothing, and you've got to categorize people. So what you're going to do is you're going to watch this guy over here, and you're not going to have to watch this guy over here because he's wearing clothes that he couldn't possibly hide a bazooka in, you know, that kind of a situation. A rocket-propelled grenade. He couldn't possibly have an AK-47 underneath his coat. That's impossible. AK-47 is longer than that. This guy could, because he's got an outfit that goes all the way down to his knees, so he could be hiding something. You know, you have to categorize people. It's the way the world works. It keeps you from being killed, maybe, in that situation. Social roles are a cluster of socially defined expectations for behavior in a situation. Social roles in many societies differ between men and women, and of course we have different social roles here. For the longest time, men had shorter hair and women had longer hair. Now all bets are off. You really never know just by looking at somebody. If you look at them from behind, you never know if they're male or female. Potentially, you never know. They're both wearing very similar clothes. Women are often socialized to pay attention to nonverbal communication, whereas men aren't. The world is a lot more dangerous if you're female than it is if you're male. For one thing, the probability of men attacking you isn't very high, but if you're female, of course, it's a bit higher. You're more likely to be attacked. So it's very important for women to watch nonverbal communication. Is he looking at me too long? Is he gazing too long? What's going on here? This could be dangerous for me. So the women have to pay more attention to nonverbal communication than men do. Negative information carries more weight than positive information when forming impressions. It is more unusual and therefore it's distinctive. Most people are neutral. You're walking down, you're at the airport in Chicago and you're walking along. Most people are fairly neutral toward you. If you see somebody that's glaring at you, is looking at you negatively, then there's a possibility that something might happen in the future. So you need to be careful of that individual. That individual may try to rob you. They may try to attack you. There's a possibility that something is dangerous out there. So you have to be aware of all these things, and we are. We are naturally aware of these things. Gossip is a frequent way of conveying negative information, and of course people do gossip. Men are just as bad as women. Don't think that they're not. Men gossip all the time. Not a lot. I'm not really sure why, what it has to do with it. Anyway. We are generally about as good at detecting deception as we are at guessing coin flips. In other words, we have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. If somebody is lying to us. Usually I don't care if somebody's lying to me. If they're lying to me, they've got a reason to do it. Expressions given off are better indicators than expressions given. In other words, you know what expressions you're giving, but you can't. It's really difficult to read other people's expressions. We overestimate importance of facial expressions, which are relatively controllable. In other words, you can control whether you're smiling or you're frowning, whether you're disgusted or not. With training, we can improve at detecting deception, but error rates remain high. So detecting deception, and even professionals that have been trained, you know, you see this on television. Oh, this person, you know, Gibbs always knows. Leroy Jethro Gibbs always knows when somebody's lying to him. Yeah, right. Nobody's that good. I'm sorry. It's just the way the world works. We can be lied to. Usually it's because we want to be lied to. We want something to be the truth. So what we're looking for is someone convincing us that we're actually correct. We want to be right. We are rarely open books. We're not completely open-minded. We have prejudices, and we want things to be the way that we think they are. So it's very easy for us to be lied to, especially if that's the lie we're looking for. What was I talking about the other day? Something about men and women. Women lying to men. Women messing around on men and men completely missing the cues for a long time. The same thing happened to me. I wanted to be lied to. I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want my wife to mess around on me. Of course not. I'm not silly. But I am silly because I just ignored the cues. I pretended that they didn't exist. I mean, other people are picking up on the cues, and other people are telling me that this is what's going on. And I've talked to other men who have been in similar situations, and exactly the same thing happened.
Is it like deception if, like, say you're having a conversation with the individual and their back is totally turned against you through the whole conversation?
Oh my goodness gracious, how in the world can you have a conversation?
I know, right? But
Completely turned around.
I'm an expert. But is that that's deception?
That's deception. Sure. They're trying to keep from showing you their face so that they don't give you the information that they don't want to give you.
Well, what if you're telling them a story and they act like they're going to sleep? Is that just being...
You're not talking about your kids, are you?
No. Is that just acting like a big butthead?
Yeah.
Or,
That's a butthead, yeah. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, butthead. Let's use that term.
How about this? Like somebody question you, but they're assuming and they give you that face for like, okay.
Right, yeah, I know you're lying
Like a
to me.
cobra. Like
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Yeah, they're asking you questions, but they already know the answers, or they think they know the answers to them, and they think that you're going to lie to them. Wait a minute, why in the world are we even having this conversation? We maintain uninformed, naive assumptions about certain types of people. There are lots of them. There are tons of them. Well, most of them are stereotypes. All women are good mothers. You know, that's a naive assumption that some people have. And we assume that these are all based on central traits of this select individual. We think it has something to do with their culture, and because their culture is this way, this is the way they are. Well, the reality is, of course, people are different than their cultures. They don't practice everything in their culture. One of the interesting things that I have seen is a lot of times leaders of groups, a lot of times the leaders of the groups don't represent the culture. The reason they are leaders is because they are different from what the cultural stereotype is, the cultural expectation. That's the reason that they're the leader. How many religious organizations do we know where the men practice the religion, but then it turns out that they're molesting, you know, little girls or something, or they're having sex with their parishioners or whatever. You know, how many times does this happen? Well, not every time, certainly, but enough. It happens enough, unfortunately. So we are naive to think that that's the way things are. As I've told you, I'm not a very religious person. I used to coach a high school soccer team, and this was around Omaha. Omaha is a very Catholic city. So we played a lot of Catholic schools. Well, in my naivete, I assumed that, you know, wow, this is going to be great. We get to play against these guys, and it's going to be us against them. There's not going to be any cheating. There's not going to be any swearing, which is always upsetting when somebody screams at you, you know, something really negative. I played soccer in Germany, and I had a nickname that was fairly obscene that the Germans gave me, of course. Yeah. Anyway, so we're playing soccer against all these Catholic schools, and my God, they swore more than any other teams, and they cheated. Oh my God, they were so dirty. And I'm thinking, this isn't right. These guys should be the fairest people on the field. This isn't right. It was really kind of strange. The worst referee we ever had was a Catholic priest. He was terrible. I mean, he was skewed everything in the direction of the Catholic schools. It was just terrible. We usually won anyway. It didn't really matter. But I was really shocked that these kinds of things were taking place. That they were screaming, you know, the F word. The fans were screaming the F word. And of course the priest was standing right there, and he's just swearing like a sailor, except he's not taking the Lord's name in vain. I guess it's okay to dump a pile of whatever, you know, on the field, as long as you don't call it Jesus' feces or something. I don't know. It was really kind of bizarre. Very, very odd. I was really surprised. But I had a naive assumption that these individuals, because they were religious, of course, that they would follow their religious precepts and not swear. But of course that didn't, or cheat. But that didn't happen at all. People who believe personalities are fixed are more influenced by implicit personality theories than those who believe traits can change. Okay, okay. I'm sorry about that's. I can't even remember his name. He was on Jersey Shore. The
Situation.
The what?
The Situation.
The Situation, is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what that has to do with. This is, of course, Larry the Cable Guy. The difference between people in the North, of course, he's from New Jersey, and he's actually from Nebraska, but he acts like he's from Alabama or Mississippi or someplace. Confirmation bias is a tendency to seek out confirming information and avoid disconfirming information. Of course, this is the way we watch the news. If you're liberal or less conservative, you watch CNN, NBC, CBS, one of the other news channels. But if you're conservative, you watch Fox News and assume...
Threat has been detected.
Huh? Is that me?
Oh, a threat has been detected.
Really?
Yeah.
What is it?
On my laptop.
Oh, you mean
Yeah, a nuclear threat has been detected.
So once we confirm once we form an impression, we seek to confirm that impression. Southerners act like this, Northerners act like this. Southerners look like this, Northerners look like that. Not really. Anyway, yeah. It perpetuates incorrect stereotypes, and of course we do. We have stereotypes about libtards and conservatives and whatnot. My brother refers to me as a libtard. I was shocked that my youngest brother is the one that's the wacko guy. But I was with my older brother, and he was complaining about my younger brother, that he was way out there someplace. And I was thinking, geez, I've been thinking that ever since he decided to back Donald Trump or something. I don't know.
What do you mean by we seek to confirm the first impression, like?
Whatever bias we have.
So like, if somebody's a butthead, and we seek to confirm that first impression,
Right.
we're seeking to confirm that they're a butthead.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So we'll never change that impression because we have this idea that he's a butthead or she's a butthead, whichever the case may be. And every time they do something that's not butthead-esque, we just ignore it. And every time they act like a butthead, we're going, yeah, jeez, I knew it all along. They were a butthead. And that's the way it works. So, I know. Now, for some reason, the first time I met my current wife, she thought that I was exciting. Okay. I'm boring as hell.
So she's still seeking to confirm that?
No. No, it's been almost 40 years, so she's
it's
figured it out by now. Darn it. Oh well. I could have fooled her forever. I thought I could anyway. Didn't work. She was real impressed with the fact that I made the Hall of Fame. She was really nice to me this weekend. Finally. Yeah, she was really nice to me this weekend. Okay. As exciting as these guys' socks are, my socks are even more exciting. No, they're about the same. There we go. So I didn't wear these socks just because of this picture. I wear these socks every day. So ask me tomorrow what socks I have on. You'll see that I match those guys pretty fairly well. Anyway, we're going to talk about social perceptions, how we come to understand other people. This is us trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Cultures around the world are different because of the need to adapt differently to different environments. One of the reasons your culture isn't the same as the Northern Plains Indians is because they hunted buffalo fairly exclusively. They didn't really hunt a whole lot of other things. And you guys lived here where there weren't that many buffaloes, so you did other things. And you found your food in other ways, and you created cultures in other ways. The people that live in the Southwest, it's not only, of course, the Dene, but it's also the Hopi and the Pima. It's the Pueblos, and the Pueblos, of course, they live in one place. There's no wandering that takes place. They were farmers. So it really all depended on who you were. So then, if we look at another group, the Apaches, that's all they did was wander. They did kind of settle. They did plant crops, but they only stayed there in the summertime. In the wintertime, they went someplace else. They wandered around. They raided. They stole livestock. So everybody had their own thing. Yes, ma'am.
You know what, last night, these two individuals, they asked me, they said, how come the Northern Plains don't have labor trees and squat answers?
Yeah.
And I looked at them and then they were like, and how come you don't speak their language like all the time? And I looked at them, I didn't really, they were, all three of them were like dumb questions.
Right.
But they were also like really kind of striking, and I was like, well, who would I speak my language to, And then, yeah, if we had ceremonies like that, we would just scare the shit out of everybody. Oh, excuse me. We would scare the crap out of everybody up there,
Oh, you would. I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was this.
And your
weird-
ceremonies are a lot shorter.
Yeah.
You never have 9-day ceremonies, or even 3-day ceremonies. If you do something, you do it. It takes about a day, if it takes a day.
Yeah.
Of course, the preparation takes a little longer. But you're right. You'd scare the shit out of everybody. And you have your own things that you pray to. So it's all different environment, and it has to do with the environment. If all you do is hunt buffalo, then your gods are going to be completely different. Your gods aren't going to be stuck on a mountain someplace. They're going to travel around with the buffalo herds. And of course, if you know anything about the Nakota, they were all starving to death. They were sitting out in the plains and they were waiting for buffalo. And so they sent their men out, and the men found sleeping buffalo. They found buffalo that weren't moving. And so they mounted a huge party, a huge hunting party to go out because the people were starving. So this was in the wintertime, and they went out, and what they found were rocks. These were rocks shaped like buffalo. And as they looked at the rocks, they turned into buffalo, and they just stood there and let them, and fed the people. So sleeping buffalo there. And you can still go there today. The sleeping buffalo is out near Fort Peck, just on this side of Fort Peck. If you've ever been to sleeping buffalo. Anyway, that's what the whole story is about. these rocks turned into buffalo and fed the people when they were starving to death. Why is that important? Well, it's a buffalo culture. It's a hunting culture.
I asked the same questions that those kids asked her when I was in Alaska.
Right.
My physical therapist, she was half Athabascan, and I asked her, do you speak your language? And she was like, no, I don't. I have to ask my dad these certain questions.
Sure.
I was like, how do you say mom? How do you say dad? I was interested because I like to call my mom and dad, shmashuje. And I was like, what do you guys call your grandmas? And she's
Right.
like, I have to ask my dad. I don't know. But I was like, do you guys practice your culture? And she was like, well, I don't because I'm half white. And I live out here in Anchorage.
Right.
But she said that back home, on the islands, they do their
Right.
things. And she was talking about a funeral ceremony. It's death up there is celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a mournful thing like down here
Right.
where we just say we don't talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Up there, it's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
This person is being honored.
Exactly. Same way on the northern plains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like,
When they have a funeral, they have a funeral.
really?
Yeah, oh yeah, they're not messing around. Oh sure, it takes 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
Somebody dies, you've got a student and one of their relative dies, you won't see them for a week. Well, there's a wake, and then there's the funeral, and then there's whatever happens afterwards. And they have to stick around.
Wow.
We stay up for like 4 days,
Mhm.
5 days. We'll sit up with the body. We have the body out for the whole time.
Really?
Eat, sleep, everything with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And-
But I haven't been to a funeral in 11 years.
Wow.
Wow.
And they'll have a funeral in the gym.
Really?
Yeah. So
Or in
everybody-
their house, they'll have their wake. They'll bring the body in
Right.
the house.
Wow.
And
I know.
being
It
down
gives
here-
closure, I think, and then instead of immediately, just putting the body in the funeral home, not doing anything, you're only there
Right.
for an hour, 3 hours,
Sure.
and they put it in the ground, they say, you're not supposed to go visit it, but you have
Right.
no closure. But I think something like that would give you closure.
Boy, I'll tell you what, if you talk about closure, my goodness. You just spend a whole week with the body, that-
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. Yeah, I've been involved in those things. If he's a veteran, then you can't, then there has to be a veteran with him at all times.
Really?
Yeah, because he's a veteran. And you don't want him to cross over without friends.
Have you ever gone to that crying ceremony?
Uh-uh.
Have you ever heard of it?
Uh-uh. Maybe it's Blackfeet and
No, it's where you were, they said that they have a crying, or wiping the tears ceremony. And what they do is they like collect star blankets, star quilts,
Star
or
quilts.
something like that all year, and then they sit around and I guess they have like a big feast or something, and after that year is over, that person passed away,
Right.
they shed their tears. That's like the whole year they can't cry.
Right.
And then, or they can cry, they can cry and
Right.
cry and cry. And during that ceremony, that's the last time they cry, but they have a medicine man come, and that medicine man blesses everybody and everything, and then I guess they talk to that spirit, and that spirit, they help that spirit move on.
Right.
And, yeah, something like that. My friend, she's Assiniboine, Grovon, Nakota.
Really? You got friends that are... Oh, just kidding.
Yeah.
They're really sweet people. As are the Blackfeet. The Blackfeet are very sweet people. Plains Indians, they're all
No, I know.
northern Pacific. Nice people. Really, really nice. But if and you can get back into things as soon as you want, but you can't, or you're not allowed to grieve longer than a year. So if it's been a year since somebody died and you're still not participating, in social things, then at the next powwow they'll dance you back into the circle. Yeah, so they'll go up into the crowd and they'll grab you and take you, and they'll force you to dance, and you have to dance because they don't want you to grieve anymore. And after that, you can't. I mean, that's the way they are. Sure. So everybody has their own culture, all right? Okay, and sometimes it's different. Okay, so, and, you know, it all has to do with returning these individuals to society. It's, when you're talking about hunting buffalo, you can't hunt all the time. So when it's time to hunt, you've got to do it. You've got to kill buffalo right now. You've got to, you know, jerk the meat and whatnot. And it takes the whole village in order to do that. So, you know, that's the way they do things up there, or that's the way they did things, and that's the traditions of the people on the northern plains. There are some norms that are culturally universal. Incest taboo. Every culture has an incest taboo. If we think about different cultures that have been around, sometimes we ignore this part because there are because we don't believe in it. We pretend that nobody else has it. But the reality is, of course, there have been incests. There have been cultures that have practiced a degree of incest. The Egyptians, for example, they were the holy people could only marry their brothers and sisters because if they married somebody else, it would destroy them. They would die. Same way with the Inca. They could only marry. They couldn't marry a commoner. They could only marry another holy person. So the incest taboo is fairly universal, relatively universal. It's only with select groups that we see it. There is some form of friendship in just about every culture. With that friendship comes these three criteria. You always respect your friend's privacy. You make eye contact when you talk to them. Because you're intimate with those individuals. Excuse me. They don't divulge things said in confidence, of course. People of higher status are talked to using formal talk, while those of lower status are spoken to with familiarity. Language is a strong social identifier. I had a friend when I was in college. I know that's a shock to everyone. I did have friends, okay. I had a friend, he was from Greece. Yanis Petros Roubatis, which means John Peter Roberts. Yanis Petros Roubatis. Anyway, he's the, this is so bizarre. So what was going on in Greece in 1967 through 1971? He graduated in 71 with me. What was going on in Greece? Well, they were in revolution, as odd as that may seem. They had the royal family had been kicked out. The 5 colonels had taken over the government, and the colonels, of course, were trying to control things in Greece. So when he wrote a letter to the government in Greece, he had to write in a formal language. When he spoke Greek, he could speak in a common language. But when he wrote to the Greek government, he had to write in the formal language. And one time he wrote to the government in common language, which is an insult to the government, or at least that's the way they read it. And they immediately revoked his visa, and they tried to force him to come back to the United States, or to Greece. To be drafted into the army was what they were trying to do. And he didn't go back. He stayed in the United States and finished his education, despite the fact that the government had revoked his visa. At that time, the United States government was kind of wondering what was going to happen in Greece, so we stopped recognizing the things that the Greek government was doing, as odd as that seems, despite the fact they were members of NATO, and we had 3 Air Force bases in Greece, 3 military bases in Greece. But he got in all kinds of trouble because he used the wrong language, as odd as that may seem. Higher status people are spoken to in a formal manner, and they speak back to a subordinate in a more familiar manner, using their first names, for example. Where I come from, if you call somebody by their last name, it means that you want to fight. I know, it seems kind of odd. So if you call somebody, you know, his name's Jim Johnson, and you call him Johnson, that means, by God, you better be ready to get punched in the nose. As odd as that seems, but that's Indiana, I guess. Around here, you can call anybody Can you insult somebody just by calling them by their name here?
You insult your mom, your dad.
Oh, you wouldn't insult your mom and dad. You're not up for a fight with your old man, I think.
What about like eye contact here? Like if you're talking to an individual and, like back home, we make a lot of eye contact,
Right.
And it's respectful.
Right.
But how about the eye contact here? If you talk to a person, you make eye contact, is it disrespectful or?
I don't know. I make eye contact all the time.
Like, sometimes I'll be talking to certain people and they'll look at me, then they turn away, look at me, turn away, look at me, turn away.
It's disrespectful because if you look at someone too long, it becomes hostile and you just want to like. So that's why, and then women don't look at men in the eyes too long, especially if they're not your brothers or your dad. It's just a form of respect.
Wow, this is weird. I don't know. I never pick up on any of that stuff. Sorry, I just look at people, I guess.
Here I was taught.
I'm not in love with everybody, okay? Okay, Francis? I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
But that's just where I come from. I'm not speaking for all women. So that's just where I come from.
So where you come from?
I come from Cove, over the mountain. I grew up with a family of women,
Okay,
and there's hardly any men, so we
Okay.
don't really
okay,
like
okay,
to,
okay. If you look at me too long, I won't read anything into it.
And like for us, if we don't talk to you and give you eye contact, it's disrespectful.
Right.
That means like you're hiding something.
You're lying, exactly.
Yeah, you're lying,
Yeah.
and did you just stab me in the back, kind of thing,
I got stabbed in the back last week. I know.
Oh.
I know. What's happening here? Not
Turn around, let's see.
See all the knives in my back? 3-page letter. Somebody wrote a 3-page letter, but it was a faculty member. I'm going, what the hell?
Who was it?
My students never say anything bad about me. Other faculty members. My God. I'm okay. Don't worry about it. I'll stick around. I'm pissed, but I'm not that pissed. I love my students. Every damn single one of my students. I love my students, but I just can't get along with the administration. What the hell's going on here? In most languages, there are 2 forms of the word you. So if you speak French, they have tu and vous. And one is intimate and the other one is formal. Okay, so if you're talking to somebody that you don't like very much, you say vous. And if you like them, you say tu, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't remember. In Spanish, is the same way. Okay, so in most circumstances, it is for the higher person to status person to suggest familiarity with lower status people. This is really weird. So I'm at the induction ceremony, and one of the people being inducted is an individual. There were 2 teams and then 1 individual. That's the way it was. Well, the individual was 6'4". He was a star basketball player. He was a star runner, cross country and track runner. Anyway, and he's this really tall guy, and he's a millionaire. He owns this huge farm in Indiana, and then he owns a even larger farm down in Brazil. So he's a multi-millionaire. So here's this guy who was a star in school. Okay, and then there are 2 teams of guys that are inducted into the Hall of Fame, and so it was really kind of odd. He sat at the most important place, at the head of the table, as it were, and he expected people to come up to him and, I don't know, genuflect. I'm not exactly sure what, but he was really, he really acted like he wanted people to acknowledge the fact that he was a better athlete than everybody else. As odd as that seems, it was really kind of strange. And I insulted him at one point. I don't care how many millions of dollars he has. I don't live in Indiana. What do I care? But it was really kind of interesting. He was insulted by the fact that I didn't treat him with deference. Of course, he's 6'4", I'm 5'6", What's the difference between the 2 of us? He was an individual hero, athletic star, and I was a team star. So I don't know, it's really kind of odd. He had a lot more money than I have. And he married a cheerleader, and he wanted everybody to know that he married a cheerleader, which is kind of interesting. Status. I know, it drives you crazy, doesn't it? I am sure that you've heard that 80% of communication is nonverbal. The reality is that we read people. We look at people as they're talking to us. We read people before they talk to us. And so most communication is nonverbal. If somebody turns away from you, if somebody turns their back on you, you know they're either a butthead or they're Beavis. Beavis or butthead, one of the two. Anyway, so we read people's expressions, we read all of these things. So 80% of communication is actually nonverbal. So you don't need somebody to confess to you. You know exactly how they feel by the expression on their face, by the way, by the fact that they're either turning away from you and not facing you when they're talking to you. And of course, since 80% of communication is nonverbal, that means that somebody with autism spectrum disorder will have a really hard time communicating because they can't read nonverbal communication. The more severe the autism, the more severe the communication problems. Somebody with Asperger's syndrome, really kind of interesting. I had a friend in college, just a gorgeous, gorgeous guy. Not that I was madly in love with him. Anyway, he was a very attractive man. Actually, my first wife was in love with him because he was so pretty. He was really a very attractive man. But he had Asperger's syndrome. And women would throw themselves at him and he would miss it. You know, it's like somebody's trying to tackle him and he kind of walks past them and they miss him. It was that kind of a situation. Everything went completely over his head because he couldn't read nonverbal communication. You know, the whole hair flipping and winking and smiling and the whole thing. He missed the whole thing. Really kind of bizarre. He became a teacher. And his classes were very popular because he was such a pretty man. But his delivery, he was boring as hell. He's pretty boring anyway, but what was his class? Victorian literature. My God, who wants to take a class in Victorian literature? And his classes were full of women because they thought he was so pretty. Anyway, but he was a terrible teacher. Well, or a great teacher because people took his classes. I don't know. How do we read this thing? Anyway, he had Asperger's syndrome. This is weird because if you went to a party, he was in a fraternity, and if you went to a party at the fraternity, John would be sitting there reading a book, and here, you know, people are falling all over him, and women are taking their clothes off, and everybody's drunk, you know, and he's studying biology or something, and he's in his own little world. He lived in his own little world all of his life. Okay, so what are we talking about? They must be taught to attend to people when they are trying to communicate in order to understand the person better, and of course that's what you have to do with people with Asperger's or people with autism spectrum disorder. People lower on the autism spectrum scale, such as people with Asperger's syndrome, can learn to attend to people easier, and for that reason they often seem like they have no problem at all. So people with Asperger's, a lot of times you don't recognize that they have Asperger's. Well, you do. I do anyway. I can really tell if somebody's got Asperger's mainly because they won't make eye contact with you. They don't pay attention to what you're doing or what you're saying. You know, sometimes you're joking and they don't get it because they're not looking at you and they can't see the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know, the whole thing. I've got a clip from Sheldon dealing with Asperger's syndrome.
I love Sheldon.
I know. He's so bad. He has Asperger's so bad. And of course, the writers claim he doesn't, but he does. He's got Asperger's. And you can look at that, but I can't show it to you because I can see it on my computer, but it won't show up there for some reason. Anyway, nonverbal communication serves a variety of functions. It helps us express our emotions. So we don't have to say something, we can just show it in our faces. It helps us express our attitudes. They help us express our personalities. They cue us as to the emotions of others. They cue us as to the attitudes of others. They cue us as to the personality of others. So we can show other people who we are, And we can get from other individuals who they are. And that's nonverbal communication. We're looking for personality, attitudes, and emotions. We can read all that. And of course, as you're wandering around the world and you're looking at people, you're reading their body language. You're trying to determine if there's any danger. You know, if you're a male, there's always danger out there. Theoretically, there's danger out there. So you have to read people. And of course, you go into the airport and you've got all these people coming off the airplane. You know, you have to figure out is there anybody that's dangerous there? Go into a restaurant, you have to figure out, is there anybody that's dangerous here? Is there a possibility that something negative is going to happen? Of course, hardly ever anything negative happens. But you have to be aware of all these things. And the more you're trained to do it, the more you see it. I was talking to a person, a military veteran, and they teach us to do these things, and it's most of it's, they didn't say you need to look at this. No, they didn't do that. They just taught us that we needed to be aware of the dangers that are out there. The idea is that humans communicate through facial expressions goes back to Charles Darwin's the expressions of the emotions in man and animals. And of course, he actually wrote a book dealing with people's expressions. He actually electrocuted people's faces so that they would make expressions. And he showed these to other individuals and said, what expression does this person have? Darwin's idea was that primary facial expressions are universal. In other words, you can go to New Guinea, you can go to Alaska, you can go to the tip of South America, you can go to the tip of Africa, and all the facial expressions will be the same. If somebody smiles, it means one thing. If somebody looks angry, if somebody has an angry expression on their face, you can read it no matter where you are. All humans encode their emotions onto their faces in the form of expressions, and of course all of these women. Can you tell which one just was
Winner?
no, the one that won?
The blonde.
The blonde.
In the middle.
The blonde in the middle? You know, these are pretty superficial smiles, aren't they? And this lady's going, damn, I lost.
And this one on the right side is like, what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. This one right here. These must all be Jennifers. There's a Jennifer, I think she was a Jennifer. She's actually transgender, which is kind of interesting. That's why she's like a head taller than everybody else. Darwin felt that facial expressions are so expressive because they were necessary ways of communicating without the strength of language. In other words, just like deer communicate with their tails, we communicate with our faces. So if somebody sees us going, you know, we know that something bad is taking place. If somebody's smiling, it means, oh, I found some food, and everybody come over and share my food. That's what happy means, I guess. I don't know. Whoops, did I go the wrong way?
Or you got down the aisle, yay!
Yay. We all know what that means. Early hominids would make a bad face when they tasted something terrible, and that would warn all the other hominids to stay away. Of course, she's eating a plate of peas, and I'm guessing, how much does she like peas?
Not very much.
She doesn't like it at all. That's a face of disgust. She got her tongue stuck out. That's how bad it is. There are some universal facial expressions. The one on the left. Can anybody identify what that lady's facial expression is?
No, she's
Sour.
I'm sorry?
Sour?
Sour? Okay. How about the kid on the boy on the right?
happy.
Happy. The lady on the left.
Anxious.
Nervous.
I'm sorry?
Nervous.
Nervous? How about the lady on the right?
Surprise.
Surprised. So there's a difference between. Okay. How about the lady on the left?
Depressed.
How about the guy on the right?
Big baby.
Big baby?
Yeah.
Is that what the way big babies look? Huh?
Like pouting.
He's pouting?
Just kidding.
Okay.
Curious. I would say curious. He looks like he's really thinking deep into something.
his lip is,
Thinned out.
and then his forehead's.
We call that number 11.
It's number 11. Oh, he's got a number
When
11.
someone gets frustrated or mad,
Looks like 111 to me. Yeah, frustrated or mad, okay. Okay, so these are universal facial expressions. Everybody can read these. But these, maybe these are universal facial expressions as well. How about the lady on the left?
Sarcastic.
How about the lady on the right?
Scared.
Anxiety.
Contempt and anxious. How about the guy on the left?
Defeat.
Shame.
Shame. How about the lady on the right?
Determination.
Determination.
Shame and determination. Okay, so we're doing pretty good on this group. How about the lady on the left?
Resentment.
Envy.
Envy. How about the lady on the right?
Embarrassment.
Embarrassment and envy is correct. How about the guy on the left? From Plains, Washington.
Patriots fan.
It's Wonder Woman's dinner.
Pride.
Pride. How about the lady on the, how about Michelle on the right?
Disapproval. Confusion.
Pride. Not impressed. She is not impressed. Okay. Decoding facial expressions tends to be pretty complicated. Remember, we don't have to have the facial expression, we don't have to be thinking what our face looks like. When the individual is experiencing more than one emotion and all are registered on their faces, this is known as affect blending. So, actually, if you watched either of my videos last week, I made one for substance abuse and one for this class. I had just gotten some really bad news, so I was pretty pissed. I just found the knives in my back, and so I was pretty upset, but I was trying to be upbeat, so I had what is referred to as affect blending. I was pissed, but I was also trying to, yeah, exactly, brush it off. I'll be okay. So many knives, so many knives. A facial expression may be ambiguous and interpretation depends on context and cues. So really, it all depends on where you are and what's going on as to how you read a facial expression. And context is huge, is massive. So if you watch the Super Bowl and watch the Eagles beat the Patriots, that's a context, okay? So the people, even the Eagles that looked like they weren't happy, they were really happy because, well, nobody beats the Patriots at the Super Bowl.
And you know, nobody
they
was
did.
really saying anything when the Patriots were ahead. Nobody would, or the Eagles are ahead.
Right.
Nobody was really like, oh yeah, you know, because
Right.
last year how the Patriots came back,
Right.
but it was a very good game.
The
They
right,
like
the good team
had
won.
it out for the Eagles the whole time. They're like, no, they're gonna lose.
Yeah,
They're
despite the fact they're
underdog."
ahead by so many points.
Yeah.
Game's not over with yet. Tom Brady will throw for over 500 yards, you know, that kind of thing.
He dropped the ball before he was at the touchdown.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was just like, shut up.
Culture may dictate how a facial expression is interpreted. A good example is, well, this is not a facial expression, but this is an expression. On the plains, at least on as far over as we were at Fort Belknap, if you call somebody moose, it means they're strong. So if you say they're moose, they're strong. Moose. You go to Salish Kootenai, and you say somebody's moose, it means they smell like a moose. It means they stink. So I had a friend that went over there and sweated with the people at Salish Kootenai, and they called him Moose, and he thought, well, they're complimenting me. No, they're telling him that he smelled bad. That's what they were telling him. It was really kind of funny. And of course, he told that over and over and over again, and became quite the joke on the reservation. But, you know, not only that, but they dance backwards. I don't know if you've ever noticed that.
They do.
They do.
I was just gonna say that, but I was like,
God, they dance backwards.
What?
At a powwow, you dance clockwise. Yeah, you dance clockwise.
Yeah, they dance backwards. When my dad goes to powwows, he's like, I'm not gonna dance like no flathead and have my ears touching the ground. And so he dances the right way, but they all dance the other way.
There is no right way and wrong way, okay? The people on the plains dance clockwise, the people up in the mountains dance counterclockwise. I don't know why they do it.
It's abnormal.
It's not abnormal because, not there anyway. Just like moose. Just like if you're moose down on the plains, it means you're strong. If you're moose up in the mountains, it means you stink.
Oh, I thought she meant like the you.
I know,
How they
I
dance
thought you
back
meant-
and
yeah,
forth.
that's
I
what
was like,
thinking.
how do they dance back?
Until they
like
said
really trying to
Oh no,
think
no,
about it.
they're not moving
Until they
backwards.
said clockwise.
No,
and
they're dancing the wrong
counterclockwise.
direction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're dancing wrong. Yeah, the Nez Perce dance backwards too, the wrong direction too. I know. Of course, I had a really good friend that was Nez Perce. He claimed that he'd want to dance backwards because actually going backwards because.
I have a student who keeps calling me a flathead.
Oh no.
I know, and I told him, I said, I'm not flathead, I'm Blackfeet, and so he just keeps saying that, and I'm like, he's like,
He thinks
what's
it's
the
a
difference?
He thinks it's a joke.
Probably.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand what he's saying.
What is he?
Huh?
I said, what is he?
He's Navajo. He's a student.
Say, hey, Hopi. Hey.
That's what I did. I called him Hopi.
Each culture will maintain their own display rules for facial expressions and nonverbal communication. In the United States, cultural norms discourage emotional displays in men. And of course, as men, we're not supposed to show our emotions. We're not supposed to say, I love you. We're not supposed to get angry, show our anger, because then, of course, we have to sneak up and attack somebody. In Japan, women are discouraged from showing strong emotion and in fact will cover their mouths if any emotion is evident. Drives you crazy. You'll be talking to a woman and she starts to laugh and she'll cover her mouth. What the hell's going on? It's just bizarre. And sometimes they'll use a fan. Of course, if they have a fan, they'll use a fan. But usually they just cover their mouths. They also have really crooked teeth. Some of them do really crooked teeth. Okay. Why do they have crooked teeth? Japanese, they want the Japanese women to have small mouths for some reason. This is culturally proper in Japan. In China, they want them to have small feet, but in Japan, they want them to have small mouths. So, okay, so they have evolved with women having smaller and smaller mouths, so their teeth get all jammed together and they get all crooked and whatnot. Anyway, so if you go to Japan, probably everybody's going to have nice teeth. Don't worry about it. But they will also have very small mouths. If you've ever seen a geisha, how they paint themselves up, they'll paint themselves white, and then they'll put a little bitty tiny lips on themselves, paint right in the middle. I know, and everything else is white. So even if they have a mouth like Julia Roberts that goes up from ear to ear, they put this little tiny mouth in the middle, look like clowns. I don't know. It's the geisha thing. Anyway, so why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time, and I'll try not to insult any more people. And I certainly would never call you a flathead. My God.
know.
Shit, Christmas.
God.
What an insult. Oh my goodness gracious. I'm just so shocked.
No, I was kidding.